I've been a plumber for 23 years, and I can tell you exactly what it feels like when a pipe finally gives out. There's this moment right before it blows. Everything looks fine on the surface, pressure's holding, no visible cracks, and then it doesn't. One second that the whole system is intact, and the next you're standing in someone's basement watching everything they built go sideways. That's the closest thing I can give you to what happened to me on a Tuesday afternoon in May, in a gymnasium that smelled like floor wax and somebody's cheap cologne, while 200 people watched my stepson thank his biological father for giving him life. His name was Kyle Pruitt. He was up at that podium in his cap and gown, and he looked out at the crowd with that big, confident grin. He'd been practicing since about fourth grade, and he said it clear as a bell into that microphone. We want to thank the man who gave us life, our real dad, not the guy who just paid the bills. I want you to sit with that sentence for a second. Not the guy who just paid the bills. I was sitting in the back row of the gymnasium at Hargrove Regional High School, wearing the button-down shirt I'd ironed that morning because this was supposed to be a celebration. 15 years? 15 years of school pickups and dentist appointments and science fair projects and algebra meltdowns at 10 o'clock at night when I had a 6 a.m. job site the next morning. 15 years of being the guy who showed up. And Kyle Pruitt just reduced all of it to a utility bill. His twin sister Megan was sitting in the second row, cap tassel bouncing, and she nodded along like he'd just said the most reasonable thing in the world. Big smile, glowing. She turned and looked at someone 3 rows ahead of me. Carl Pruitt, the biological father, the man who once pawned Megan's bicycle to pay for gas, who owed somewhere north of $14,000 in back child support, who had contributed to these two kids' lives in exactly 2 ways. Some DNA and a string of broken promises that stretched back a decade. Carl was beaming, chest out, gold chain catching the gymnasium lights. Like he'd just been handed a trophy he didn't earn, and didn't care that everyone in the room knew it. My wife Rachel didn't turn around, didn't look at me, didn't even flinch. She just sat there with this expression on her face that I can only describe as a smile that had been left out too long, something that used to be warm and had gone stiff and waxy. Like she'd practiced being still for exactly this moment and was proud of how well she was pulling it off. I didn't stand up, didn't walk out, didn't make a sound. I just sat there and felt something inside me go very, very quiet. Not the sad kind of quiet, not the hurt kind. The other kind. The kind that comes after the hurt, when your body stops fighting the current and just lets the river take it where it's going. I looked at Kyle up at that podium, grinning like he'd just won something. I looked at Megan, all lip gloss and borrowed confidence. I looked past Rachel, right past her, and found myself staring at a loose wire hanging above the basketball hoop at the far end of the gym, just swaying slightly in the air conditioning draft. I watched that wire for a long time. A woman in a blue floral hat 2 rows up nudged her husband and whispered something. He squinted back at me the way you look at someone who's wandered into the wrong party. I heard her say, quietly enough that she thought I couldn't, "Isn't that their stepdad back there?" He looked at me another second and then turned back around. "Yeah, that's their stepdad. The guy who paid the bills. Nice to meet you." After the ceremony, everyone moved out to the front steps for photos. Rachel got in the middle, arms around both twins, and she was radiant in a way I hadn't seen in a while. Genuinely lit up, the way she used to look on our wedding day, before she decided I was more useful as a financial instrument than a husband. Carl stepped into the frame, and Kyle tossed him a spare graduation cap and said, "Put it on, Dad." And Carl laughed that big barking laugh of his and put it on, and everybody clapped. Nobody called me over. I stood about 15 feet away and watched the whole thing like I was watching a movie I'd already seen the ending of. A ghost at his own funeral, somebody said once about something else entirely. That's what it felt like. Exactly that. When the crowd started thinning out, I walked over to Rachel. She was standing with her sister Donna, wine cup already in hand, laughing about something. She saw me coming and her expression shifted into that careful, neutral look she'd been perfecting for months. "You need help packing up the banners?" I asked. "I can grab the signs." She looked at me like I'd asked something mildly confusing. Don't take it personally, Gary. They're just kids. Just kids. I nodded, said nothing. Smiled even, which I'm not proud of. But sometimes your face does what it needs to do to get you through the next 5 minutes. But something had clicked over in my chest, quiet as a thermostat switching modes. Not hot, cold, and cold, in my experience, lasts a lot longer than hot. That night, I sat in the garage on the old folding chair I kept next to the tool bench, the one with the torn vinyl armrest I'd been meaning to replace since 2019. The beer fridge hummed, the rafters creaked. The rest of the house was full of noise. Rachel and her sister in the kitchen, the twins on their phones, Carl's laugh cutting through the walls like a car alarm you can't locate. I sat with the lights off for a while, just looking at the shelves. There were boxes stacked along the back wall, labeled in black marker. Kyle, Science Fair. Megan, Third Grade Art. Christmas Decor 2017. Each one was a little monument to some ordinary Tuesday when I'd been the person who showed up. Kyle's Pinewood Derby car was up on the shelf. We'd spent an entire February night on that thing, just the two of us, with a half-broken Dremel and a YouTube tutorial playing on my phone, and he'd been so proud when it actually rolled straight. Megan's papier-mâché volcano, painted hot pink for reasons she never fully explained, sat in the corner. She'd built the first version the night before the science fair, and it had collapsed around midnight. And I'd stayed up until 2 in the morning helping her rebuild it from scratch, so she could walk in there the next morning with her head up. Kyle's old lunchbox was up on the top shelf. Ninja Turtles, faded. He used to call it his battle pack. I'd cleaned peanut butter out of that thing more times than I could count. Funny what sticks with you. There was a framed photo on the pegboard, the four of us at Niagara Falls, matching shirts that Rachel had insisted on. They said, Team Matthews across the chest. I remember thinking at the time that it was a little corny, but kind of sweet. Looking at it now in the dark, with Carl's laugh coming through the drywall, it felt like the punchline to a joke I'd been the setup for all along. I stood up eventually. My knees cracked, they always do, and I climbed the stairs out of the garage slowly, one hand on the rail. Rachel was in the kitchen scraping leftover cake off a plastic plate. She didn't look up. "You're being dramatic," she said, like we'd already been having this conversation and I'd just walked into the middle of it. It was a moment. Kids say things. Don't make it bigger than it is. I didn't answer. I walked down the hall, into the bedroom, opened the closet, and pushed past the blazers I never wore anymore to the small fireproof safe on the top shelf. 6 digits. Click. Inside was a thick envelope. Checks, savings bonds, a printed summary of the college fund I'd been building for 5 years, a little from every tax return, every bonus, every overtime shift I'd worked without complaint. It wasn't just money. It was a decision I'd made, over and over, to believe in their futures, to believe that what I was building with this family was real. I pulled out the top check. Megan's name. First semester tuition at Hudson State University. I held it for a long time. I thought about the little girl who used to climb into my lap with a half-eaten granola bar and say, "Daddy, can you read to me?" in that sleepy voice she had when she was trying to stay up past bedtime. Then, I folded the check back up, put it in the envelope, and clicked the safe shut. No tears, no drama. Just a man standing in a dark closet, understanding something clearly for the first time. They think the money's waiting for them. They don't realize I was the money, and I'm not waiting anymore. The graduation party was at our house the next afternoon. Rachel had spent the morning decorating, balloons, a banner, the good tablecloth. I'd hung the congratulations sign in the backyard before breakfast because that's the kind of thing I did automatically, and the kind of thing that had become so habitual I'd stopped noticing I was the only one who did it. The house filled up fast. Neighbors, cousins, Rachel's work friends, a few of the twins' classmates, and Carl, of course. Carl holding court at the kitchen island like a returning war hero, shirt 2 sizes too tight, gold chain swinging, telling stories about himself to people who were too polite to walk away. Rachel stood next to him with her wine glass half raised, laughing at everything he said, that high-pitched laugh she used to save for my birthday. I stood near the bookshelf in the living room, the one that used to have our wedding photos on it. Those had been replaced at some point with candles and a farmhouse sign that said, "This is us," in distressed wood lettering. I stared at that sign for a good 30 seconds. Sure it is. Kyle came inside at one point to grab a soda and walked right past me without making eye contact. Didn't say hi, didn't say anything. I was standing 3 feet away, and he looked straight through me like I was a floor lamp. I'd put an envelope on the gift table earlier. Simple white envelope, clean handwriting. To Kyle, proud of you. I watched from across the room when he picked it up 20 minutes later on the back deck. He tore it open, pulled out the card, glanced at the check inside, and shrugged. Thanks, he said to nobody in particular, then folded the whole thing back up and dropped it on the table next to somebody's half-eaten cupcake. Megan never opened hers. I'm not sure she ever noticed it was from me. And here's the thing. That was the actual moment, not the speech, not the photo I wasn't invited into. That moment on the deck, watching Kyle shrug at 15 years of effort like it was a grocery store gift card. That was when something shifted from pain into something else entirely. Freedom. There's a strange kind of liberation in realizing nobody expects anything from you anymore. They'd already written me out of the story. I was set dressing. Background noise. They'd forgotten to move me off stage. So I decided to leave on my own. I walked back inside, down the hallway, past Rachel and Carl clinking glasses, past the graduation balloons, into the bedroom. Opened the closet. 6 digits. Click. This time I didn't just look. I took every check, every savings bond, the final bonus deposit, all of it, and moved it into my briefcase. Then I sat down at the desk, opened my laptop, and transferred every cent to a private account at a different institution entirely. New passwords. 2-factor authentication. Alerts set up on my phone, clean, documented, completely legal. Every dollar in that fund had come from my paycheck, my tax returns, my overtime. My name on every deposit slip. Then I closed the laptop, walked back out to the party, and got myself a beer. Rachel was in the backyard laughing at something Carl was showing people on his phone. Megan was sitting on the edge of the hot tub with her friends. Kyle was doing whatever Kyle did, which generally involved being the loudest person in any given space. None of them noticed anything had changed. Why would they? They'd been living in a world where the safety net was invisible, because it had always just been there. They'd never had to think about where it came from or what it cost. That's the thing about being reliable. People stop seeing it as a choice and start seeing it as gravity. Just a force of nature. Just a fact of life. Just the guy who pays the bills. Well, not anymore. The next morning I called into work. My foreman, Pete, said, "Take what you need, man," and something about the plainness of that landed harder than it should have. I put on a clean shirt, the decent khakis, and drove across town to a brick building with spotless glass windows and a receptionist who smiled like she genuinely meant it. I wasn't there to explore options. I had a list. Dennis Greer was the lawyer. Mid-60s, silver hair, the kind of guy who looked like he'd been playing chess with judges since before I was born and had never once lost a match. He glanced at the envelope I slid across his desk and raised one eyebrow about a millimeter. "You're serious about this?" It wasn't really a question, but I answered it anyway. I was serious the moment they thanked a man who never bought a single notebook. He nodded once, slowly, like something had just confirmed itself for him. Then he picked up his pen and got to work. We set up a trust, not for Megan, not for Kyle, for a girl named Patty Oakes. Patty was Rachel's niece, her brother Dale's daughter. Quiet kid, early 20s, the kind of person who goes unnoticed in a room full of louder people and is somehow better for it. Rachel had always kept her at arm's length, said she was too serious and kind of awkward, which in Rachel's language meant she had no interest in brunch gossip, didn't care about social media, and wasn't impressed by things that were supposed to impress people. Patty worked the overnight shift at a grocery store and cleaned office buildings on weekends. Her mom, Dale's ex-wife Connie, used to mention how Patty had always wanted to be a veterinarian, but college had become one of those things that lived in the category of someday, which for people in Patty's situation usually meant never. I'd seen her last at Christmas, She'd shown up with a tin of homemade cookies, helped clear the dishes without being asked, and at the end of the night, when I was loading things into my car, she was the only person who came outside and said, "You need a hand with any of that?" She was the only one who asked. I called her on a Wednesday afternoon. She picked up on the third ring, slightly out of breath. "Sorry, I'm on break. Everything okay?" "Depends," I said. "You still thinking about veterinary school?" A short laugh. The kind that's half disbelief. "Are you serious right now?" "I'm not joking, Patty." Silence. Long enough that I thought the call had dropped. "Gary." Her voice had gone careful, like she was afraid to want something out loud. "I can't let you. Why would you? I can't promise the whole ride," I said. "But I can get you started. Tuition, books, housing. A cushion for the first year. You've earned it." "I haven't done anything," she said quietly. "Yes, you have. You showed up and helped without being asked. You treated people like they mattered when nobody was watching. That's not nothing, Patty. That's actually most of it." Another silence. Then, barely above a whisper, "Why me?" "Because you never asked." She didn't cry. Not then. She just breathed for a second and said, "Okay." And in that one word, I heard something I hadn't heard in a long time. Someone who understood that what was being offered wasn't charity. It was recognition. That afternoon, I met with my financial advisor and moved everything officially. The trust was in Patty's name, no connection to the Matthews household, no paper trail Rachel could follow without a court order and a very good reason. Everything documented, everything clean, everything mine to give. Meanwhile, back at the house I still technically lived in, the fantasy continued without interruption. I saw the family group chat on the kitchen iPad, Rachel and the twins planning dorm logistics. Megan had already picked out sage green bedding. Kyle was debating which monitors to bring. Rachel was talking about turning Megan's room into a yoga studio once she was gone and whether to donate the wine glasses that didn't match anymore. Nobody checked the account balance. Why would they? The world just worked. It always had. Dad, stepdad, correction, was always just there with the check and the car and the safety net, quiet and reliable as a utility company. You don't think about the power until it goes out. So, while they measured for curtain rods and argued about Kyle's pet lizard, I was quietly, efficiently, and completely legally rewriting the ending of a story they thought they already knew. The email arrived on a Thursday morning. Rachel was in the kitchen when her laptop chimed. She had that reflexive half smile she gets when she thinks it's something good. A coupon, a confirmation, something easy. Then she read it. Then she read it again. Subject: deposit not received. Action required. Hudson State University admissions and housing. She stared at it, refreshed, stared again. Then she picked up her phone. I was sitting in my truck outside a deli, unwrapping a turkey sandwich when the screen lit up. Rachel, home. I let it ring twice just to finish the thought I was having, then picked up. You didn't send the deposit. No hello, no warm-up. Just that flat, slightly elevated tone she uses when she's deciding how worried to be. The housing for Hudson, Kyle's dorm, Megan's dorm, they're saying it bounced or wasn't sent. Something. I took a slow bite of the sandwich, chewed, swallowed. Oh, that's... Gary, what does that mean? Did you forget? Is there a problem with the account? I'll look into it. A pause. The kitchen clock ticking in the background. Are you okay? Never better, I said, and hung up. That night, Megan was at the kitchen table, pretending to be on her laptop, but clearly running surveillance on her mother's face. She caught enough of the phone call to ask, in that careful tone teenagers use when they're trying to sound casual about something they're genuinely scared of. Is the money not there? Rachel waved her off. It's probably just a mix-up. Your dad probably just needs to make a call. Stepdad, Megan corrected. Automatically. Like a reflex. Kyle was on the couch, phone up, not looking at anyone. He's not going to do anything, he said, scrolling. He's too soft. Remember when he cried at Finding Nemo? Twice. Megan laughed, but it was thinner than usual. Less certain. Kyle had always been the loudest room in any building. That confident, slightly too much energy that gets mistaken for charisma when you're 17 and gets you in serious trouble when the world stops handing you things. He'd never really learned the difference between receiving and earning. because in his experience, there had never been a difference. Things just arrived. People just provided. That was about to become a very expensive lesson. Rachel texted me that night. Brunch Sunday? Just us. We should talk. Little red heart emoji. I looked at that text for a while. Just us. That was Rachel code for, I need to manage you somewhere public where you can't get too loud, and the eggs Benedict will soften your defenses. She'd always been better at this than she got credit for. The careful staging, the soft approach, the way she could make you feel like you were the most important person in the room right up until the moment she needed something from you. I typed back, sure, looking forward to it, which was completely true. I was looking forward to it the way you look forward to watching someone confidently walk into a glass door they haven't noticed yet. The brunch place was one of those converted farmhouse spots that charges $14 for avocado toast and acts like you should be grateful. Exposed brick, Edison bulbs, servers who introduce themselves by name and ask about your dietary philosophy. Rachel's choice, obviously. Neutral ground, she'd said. What she meant was controlled environment with good lighting and enough ambient noise to muffle an uncomfortable conversation. She was already there when I arrived, sitting at a window table in white linen, sunglasses pushed up into her hair, looking like someone had cast her in the role of woman having a reasonable adult conversation. She stood and gave me a quick kiss on the cheek, like we were two colleagues meeting for a working lunch. Hi, stranger, she said, warm and a little breezy. I sat down. Ordered black coffee, no food. Rachel ordered something with hollandaise and a mimosa, and began stirring it with the slow, deliberate energy of someone who has rehearsed what they're about to say. That email from Hudson threw me, she started. I just want to make sure we're on the same page about the timeline. I thought the deposits were going out automatically. I said. You always handled that stuff so well? Remember that year you did our taxes when I completely fell apart? God. She laughed softly and touched my hand across the table. You just took the whole mess and turned it into something manageable. You always do. I took a sip of coffee and didn't say anything. She kept going, warming to it now, leaning into the retrospective. When Kyle had that asthma attack in second grade, and you stayed in that horrible plastic chair all night at the hospital, I think about that sometimes. And when Megan lost her math binder the night before finals, and you drove to 3 different stores at 11 o'clock at night to find a replacement. 3 Targets, I confirmed. The third one was 20 minutes out of town. Exactly, she smiled. You did that. That's who you are, Gary. She paused, letting it settle. I just want us to be okay. The kids, they're young. They say things without thinking about the weight of them. Kyle especially. He's loud, he's impulsive, but his heart is in the right place. Is it? I said pleasantly. She blinked. What? His heart. Is it in the right place? Rachel tilted her head slightly, recalibrating. I just want to know we're okay. That you'll take care of the deposit. That we can move past this. I set my cup down on the saucer very carefully. Of course, I said. You can count on me. Her whole face relaxed. She reached across and squeezed my hand. I knew it. I knew you wouldn't let them down. I haven't let anyone down, I said. That's actually been my whole problem. She laughed, like I'd made a small joke. I let her. That afternoon, I met Patty at the back entrance of the community center, where she worked part-time. She was still in her work polo, hair in a ponytail, face flushed from whatever she'd been doing inside. She looked tired in the way that people who work 2 jobs always look tired. Not beaten, just used up for the day, with something still burning underneath it. I handed her the envelope. Thick, heavy. Inside, documentation, account information, confirmation numbers, a prepaid account in her name, and a note I'd written that morning on a piece of paper torn from the legal pad on my desk. She opened it slowly, looked at the numbers, looked at the note, then looked at me. Gary. Her voice was barely there. I can't. You can, I said. You will. Just do something good with it. She read the note again. Because someone should know what effort looks like. She looked up and her eyes were wet, but she wasn't crying, not quite. It was that particular expression people get when they've been waiting for something for so long they've stopped expecting it, and then it shows up anyway, and they don't quite know what to do with their face. That's the kind of gratitude you can't manufacture. It's not the kind you get from writing a check to someone who expected it. It's the kind that only exists when someone who had nothing coming gets something anyway. And they know the difference. That same evening, Kyle posted on Instagram. Photo of him and Carl at the backyard grill, beer cans raised, big grins. Caption: Can't wait to move into Hudson. Big thanks to the man who made it happen. Free ride, family first. The man who made it happen. I saw it and I actually laughed. Out loud, alone in my apartment, genuinely laughed. Not because it was funny exactly, but because it was so perfectly timed. So completely, beautifully on brand. While Kyle was posting tributes to Carl, every dollar that was supposed to fund that dorm room was sitting in a trust account for a girl who cleaned office buildings on weekends and had never once asked anyone for anything. The irony was almost artistic. Orientation week at Hudson was supposed to be the victory lap. Megan had ordered new bedding in sage green and had a whole plan for her dorm room wall. Fairy lights, a gallery of photos, the aesthetic she'd been curating on Pinterest for 2 years. Kyle had packed like he was shipping out. 3 duffel bags, a PS5, 2 monitors, sneakers still tagged because he'd been saving them for the first party. They'd taken photos that morning, bright and grinning, Rachel behind the camera. Megan captioned hers, "On to bigger things." Kyle posted with a flexed arm and a sunglasses emoji. Carl commented, "Proud of you, son," and Rachel liked it within 30 seconds. I wasn't invited to the send-off. That was fine. I'd taken the day off anyway. Not for them, for me. I sat on the porch of my apartment with a cup of coffee and watched the birds work the feeder I'd put up the week before, and I waited. I didn't have to wait long. At 2:30 p.m., the first call came. Rachel. I let it go to voicemail. At 2:33, a text. "What the hell is going on? Call me now." At 3:04, a text from Megan. The first time she'd contacted me in over 2 months. "They're saying tuition wasn't paid. I'm literally at orientation. This is humiliating." I waited a few minutes, then typed back 3 words. "Talk to your mom." At 4:10, the in-person arrival. Rachel knocked on my door the way people knock when they're past caring about being polite about it. Hard, fast, the kind of knock that's really a demand wearing a thin disguise. I opened the door calmly, coffee in hand, and stepped back to let her in. She came in like weather. They said tuition never cleared. Her voice was tight, controlled in the way that means it's about 5 seconds from not being controlled. Megan was standing in the hallway crying. "Kyle couldn't get his dorm key. What did you do?" "Tough day," I said. "What did you do, Gary?" I walked to the kitchen, opened the drawer, pulled out a folded piece of paper, and slid it across the counter. Withdrawal slip, joint college fund account, dated the day after graduation. Full balance. She stared at it. The color in her face went through 3 different stages before she found words. "You can't be serious," she said. It came out as a whisper. "I was very serious," I said. "I've been serious about this family for 15 years. Apparently that was the problem. This is their future, Gary." Her voice cracked on my name. "You can't just... This is their future. You can't take that away because your feelings got hurt at a graduation ceremony." "My feelings didn't get hurt," I said. "I got clarity. There's a difference." I leaned against the counter. "You all made it very clear what I was. The bill payer, the background, the guy who wasn't real. So I stopped paying the bills." "That's not spite, Rachel. That's just listening." "We'll sue," she said, and her chin came up. "We'll take you to court. You can't just empty a college fund." "You can try," I said. "But every dollar in that account came from my paycheck. My name on every deposit, my tax returns, my overtime, my bonuses, completely documented. Nothing illegal, just inconvenient." Her mouth opened, closed. The certainty went out of her face like someone had turned off a light. A car pulled up outside. Kyle and Megan. They didn't wait for it to fully stop before they were out and moving toward the door. Kyle came through first, and I'll give him credit. He wasn't performing this time. He was genuinely shaken. "Gary." He stopped in the middle of the room. "They took my student ID. I don't even have a room. What is happening?" Sounds like a problem for your real dad, I said. The silence that followed was different from the gymnasium silence. That one had been awkward, uncomfortable, full of people looking away. This one was the silence of something landing, something real and heavy and impossible to shrug off. Megan's eyes were red. Why would you do this? Her voice was smaller than I'd heard it in years. Not the confident, slightly dismissive Megan from the graduation stage, just a 20-year-old kid standing in a room realizing the floor wasn't as solid as she'd thought. After the speech, I looked at both of them. After you told a room full of people that I was just the one who paid the bills, I figured I'd stop. Seemed like the logical next step. Neither of them said anything. They just stood there, and I watched something move across their faces. Not anger, not quite. Something closer to the first real understanding they'd ever had that consequences were a thing that existed and applied to them. Rachel sank onto the couch, hands over her face. What are we supposed to do now? I walked to the door and held it open. The afternoon light came in warm and even. Figure it out, I said. You've got Carl. You've got each other. You'll manage. And I watched them sit there in the quiet of a house where the safety net had just been pulled away, realizing for the first time in their lives that it had always been a choice. The Matthews family barbecue was a summer tradition. Aunt Linda's backyard, lawn chairs, paper plates, burgers that were always a little too charred, potato salad that somehow tasted exactly the same every year, regardless of who made it. The invitation came through the group chat. Bring sides, 2 o'clock. I almost didn't go. Then I thought about it for about 30 seconds and decided that actually, yes, I very much wanted to go. I arrived early, which I always did, because early means you get to watch everything before the performance starts. I found a chair near the edge of the yard, got myself a glass of iced tea, and settled in. Aunt Linda came over from the grill and hugged me. Gary, I'm so glad you came. Haven't seen you since Easter. Been around, I said. Good to be here. By 3 o'clock, the backyard was full. Kids running through the sprinkler. The smell of lighter fluid and cut grass. Carl was already on his second beer, holding court near the cooler, trying to bond with Megan and Kyle with the slightly too eager energy of someone who knows he's behind and is trying to make up for it all at once. Rachel arrived 20 minutes late in a bright yellow sundress that looked like she'd put it on specifically to signal that everything was fine, actually. She made the rounds, hugs, kisses, that practiced bright laugh, but I could see the seams from where I was sitting. The laugh was a half beat off. The eyes weren't matching the mouth. It started with Uncle Dave. Dave was a good man, simple and direct in the way of men who've worked with their hands their whole lives. He found Kyle near the drink table and clapped him on the shoulder. So, how's college life? You all settled in? Kyle's face did something complicated. He looked at Rachel. Rachel looked at her wine glass and said too brightly, We're working through some administrative stuff. Just a little hiccup. Then Megan's cousin Bree wandered over and asked if she'd picked a major yet. And Megan started to answer, and Rachel tried to steer the conversation, and the whole thing started to unravel in that slow, public, impossible-to-stop way that Rachel had clearly not planned for. We would have had all of that figured out, Rachel said, and her voice had an edge in it now. If someone hadn't decided to blow up everything we'd been working toward for years. The grill hissed. Somebody's kid stopped running through the sprinkler. The yard went quiet in that particular way that outdoor gatherings go quiet. Gradually, like sound being turned down on a dial. Aunt Linda looked up from the grill. Rachel. Rachel turned and found me across the yard. I was sitting in my lawn chair with my iced tea, legs crossed, face neutral. She looked at me the way a heat-seeking missile looks at a target. He took it, she said, loud enough now that nobody was pretending not to listen. The entire college fund. Just emptied it. The day after graduation. After everything. After 15 years of this family. Rachel. Aunt Linda's voice was quiet, but it had weight. No. Rachel stepped toward the center of the yard. She was fully in it now, committed, the way you get when you've been holding something in for too long and it finally finds its way out in the worst possible setting. Gary withdrew every cent. After everything we did for him, after raising those kids, I said pleasantly from my chair. She stopped. Go ahead, I said. Finish that sentence. The yard was completely still now. Carl had put his beer down. Kyle and Megan were near the back fence, not moving. Aunt Linda cleared her throat. Rachel, honey, wasn't that the graduation where they got up and thanked Carl? On the microphone? In front of everybody? She said it gently, but she said it clearly. I saw the video. You were right there. Rachel blinked. That was their choice? I didn't. You were clapping, someone said from the back. I didn't see who. Rachel's face went through several colors. I didn't mean, this is not. He blindsided us. He didn't give any warning. I stopped paying the bills, I said, like I was told. Silence. Then the murmurs started. The low, private kind that moved through a crowd like a current. Cousin Bree whispered something to her boyfriend. Uncle Dave shook his head slowly at his shoes. Carl looked like he was trying to remember if there was somewhere else he needed to be. Kyle stepped forward. His voice was different from the graduation voice. No projection, no performance. We didn't mean it like that. The speech, it was graduation, it was emotional. We weren't thinking. You were thinking clearly enough to say it into a microphone, I said. Not angry. Just true. More silence. Rachel looked around the yard. She was looking for allies, for someone to step in and help her reframe this, and she found nothing but people suddenly very interested in their deviled eggs and the middle distance. The quiet judgment of people who'd known all of us for years and had now silently picked a side. I finished my iced tea, set the glass down on the armrest, and stood up, nodded to Aunt Linda. Thanks for having me, Linda. The burgers were great. Anytime, Gary, she said. You know that. I walked out through the side gate, past the cooler, past Carl, who didn't make eye contact, past the sprinkler that was still going even though all the kids had stopped running through it. Behind me, I could hear Rachel starting to say something and then not saying it. The sound of a woman standing in the middle of a yard full of family, realizing that loyalty doesn't follow blood. It follows the truth. It was Sarah's mom who started it. Connie Oakes, Dale's ex-wife, who still used an older phone and typed with 2 fingers and had probably never gone viral in her life. She posted a photo on Facebook, Patty in her new dorm room, holding a box of textbooks, that quiet, stunned smile on her face that you only get when life surprises you in the right direction. The caption said, "My daughter just got a second chance." Not because of luck, not because anyone had to, but because someone chose to. Thank you, Gary Matthews. You owed her nothing. You gave her everything. That post moved through our town the way things move through small towns. Fast and personal. Not celebrity viral, not algorithm viral. The real kind. Teachers who remembered Patty from high school. Neighbors who knew Connie from church. Old friends of Dale's who'd watched Patty grow up in a house that kept getting harder to live in. The comments came in waves. She deserves this so much. That's what real fatherhood looks like. I remember Gary coming to every single event for those kids. Everyone. And now this. Rachel saw it. She showed up at my job site the next morning. I was on break in the loading bay, sitting on an overturned bucket with a gas station coffee, when her car pulled in at the wrong angle with the headlights still on. She got out unsteadily, like the ground wasn't quite level. Hi, Gary. She was already crying. Not the performative kind. The ugly, stripped-down kind that happens when there's nobody left to perform for. Mascara tracking down her face, hair not quite right, like she'd gotten dressed in a hurry and then sat in the car for a while before she could make herself move. I stood up and started walking toward the side door. Gary, wait, she followed. Please, can we just... 5 minutes, just 5 minutes. I kept walking. They're your kids too. Her voice broke on it. We made a mistake. We didn't mean for it to... Please just stop. The word please had a particular shape coming from Rachel. It was a word she used strategically, deployed at the right moment, calibrated for maximum effect. I'd heard it 100 times over 15 years, and it had worked most of them, not this time. I badged through the side door and let it close behind me. Through the glass, I could see her standing in the parking lot, hand pressed flat against the door. Not pushing, just resting there. Mascara gone, shoulders down, looking like someone who had just run out of moves. That night, I got home around 8. My apartment building's hallway light was doing its usual flickering thing. It had been doing it since I moved in, and I'd reported it twice and stopped caring. I stepped off the elevator and she was there. Rachel, on her knees in front of my door. Her purse had spilled. Keys, receipts, a little orange prescription bottle rolling in slow circles on the tile. She wasn't crying the way she'd been crying at the job site. This was something rawer, the kind of crying that comes from a place underneath strategy, underneath calculation, just pure, exhausted grief. Gary. She looked up at me, and for a moment, I saw something I hadn't seen in a long time. Not the Rachel who managed and maneuvered and made everything look effortless. Just a woman who was frightened. Please, please look at me. I'll make them apologize. I'll fix it. Just don't walk away. Don't walk away from us. A door opened at the end of the hall. Someone looked out, registered the situation, and slowly pulled it shut again. I stood there for a moment and looked at her. Really looked. Not with anger. I was past anger. With something quieter. The kind of distance you develop slowly over years, when you keep giving someone the benefit of the doubt, and they keep spending it. I stepped past her carefully, unlocked my door, and paused in the doorway. Rachel, I said. She looked up. I'm not angry at you, I said. That's the thing you need to understand. I'm not angry. I'm just done. I closed the door. No slam, no speech. Just the soft click of a lock, and the sound of someone on the other side of it understanding, maybe for the first time, that there are some things you can't call back once they're gone. About a week after the barbecue, I ran into my neighbor Walt in the parking lot of our complex. Walt was a retired high school guidance counselor, 60-something, recently divorced, the kind of guy who made really good chili and had strong opinions about baseball. We'd been friendly since I moved in, the kind of neighbors who stop and actually talk rather than just nodding. He'd seen Rachel in the hallway that night, and he didn't bring it up directly, which I respected. Instead, he just asked how I was doing, and I told him honestly that I was getting there. You know what helped me, he said, leaning against his car, after my divorce? I talked to a therapist for a while, which was good. But then a friend of mine told me about this thing called singletune.com. He said it casually, like he was mentioning a mechanic he liked. It's not like the regular apps. Before you see anyone's profile, before any of that, you take this whole assessment. Questions about what you actually believe in, what you've been through, what you want from your life going forward. It matches you based on that. Values, not photos. I nodded slowly. Huh. I know how that sounds, he said. I was skeptical too. But it's built for people who've been through something real. Divorce, loss, that kind of thing. People who aren't 25 and looking for something casual. He shrugged. I'm not saying run out and do it tomorrow. I'm just saying it's there. I thought about it on the drive to the bank that afternoon. Didn't dwell on it. Just let it sit somewhere in the back of my mind, where things go when you're not ready to look at them directly yet. The bank was cool and quiet, soft jazz in the background, carpet thick enough to absorb the sound of everything that had led up to this moment. Patty was already there when I arrived, sitting in one of the chairs near the window, wearing a blazer that still had the tag tucked carefully into the collar. Thrift store, probably, but she'd pressed it. She was tapping her fingers on her knee and stopped when she saw me. Hey, she said. Hey yourself, I said. You ready? I think so. She paused. What if I mess up? What if I'm not as good at this as you think I am? I sat down next to her. You cleaned offices on weekends for 2 years to help your mom pay her medical bills. You worked nights at a grocery store and still found time to research veterinary programs. You never complained about any of it to anyone. You're going to be fine, Patty. She looked at her hands. You barely know me. I know enough, I said. Sometimes that's all it takes. The teller called us over. Everything was in order. The trust, the account, the documentation. Just needed a final signature to release the funds. I slid the folder to Patty. She looked at it for a moment, then at me, like she was still waiting for the part where it turned out to be a mistake. There's no catch, I said. Just sign it. Her hands were shaking slightly. She signed. The teller smiled. Lucky girl. I shook my head, standing up. Not luck. She put in the work. The money just finally caught up with her. We walked out into the late afternoon. The heat was starting to ease off, long gold lights stretching across the parking lot. Patty stopped at the bottom of the steps and hugged me. One of those full, breathless hugs that people only give once in a lifetime, when something they stopped believing in turns out to be real. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She got into her rideshare, and I watched it pull out of the lot and head toward campus, toward a future that nobody had handed her, and that she was going to run toward with everything she had. I drove home the long way, windows down, not in any particular hurry. There was a stretch of road on the east side of town where you passed the old neighborhood before you got to the highway, and I found myself turning that direction without fully deciding to. Old habit, the route I'd driven for 15 years. The house looked the same from the outside. Same brick, same cracked driveway I'd been meaning to resurface for 3 summers. But there was a sign out front now, white, slightly crooked, wobbling in the evening breeze, for sale. Realtor's name and number printed at the bottom. The garage door was open, cardboard boxes stacked inside. Megan was on the lawn dragging a suitcase toward a car, moving with that efficient, slightly robotic energy of someone who's getting through something rather than doing something. Kyle came out the front door with a flat-screen TV tucked under his arm like a football, moving carefully, not looking up. Neither of them saw me. Or if they did, they didn't show it. Rachel was on the porch, sitting in one of the plastic lawn chairs, ankles crossed, sunglasses on even though the sun was mostly behind the trees. She wasn't doing anything, just sitting there, watching her kids load a car in front of a house that was about to belong to someone else. She saw me. I know she did. Her head turned just slightly in the direction of the truck. I didn't slow down, didn't roll the window down, didn't wave, didn't look for a reaction, didn't need one. I just drove past the cracked driveway I'd meant to fix, past the garage where the boxes were still labeled in my handwriting, past the porch where I'd sat on 100 summer evenings thinking I was building something permanent, past the people who called someone else real, past the idea I'd carried for 15 years that if you just showed up, if you just kept being reliable and present and steady, eventually the people you loved would see it and it would mean something. Sometimes it doesn't. But sometimes the effort goes somewhere better than you planned. Sometimes it finds the person it was always meant for. And when it does, you feel it, clean and clear. Like a system finally running right after years of working around a problem you'd stopped noticing. I thought about what Walt had said in the parking lot. The questions about what you believe in, what you've been through, what you actually want. Not a photo, not a proximity match. Just the truth about who you are, offered to someone who might recognize it. That didn't sound like a bad place to start. I merged onto the highway and let the town fall away behind me. The radio was playing something I half recognized. Older song. The kind that sounds like someone's memory. I turned it up a little. In my rearview mirror, nothing worth looking at. Everything worth looking at was ahead.